Hello there and greetings from lockdown Sydney. Special shout out to my friends in Vietnam where the lockdown is especially heavy duty right now. Hope you're all doing okay wherever you are, and to those of you who are not locked down at all and enjoying freedom, good for you, and we look forward to joining your ranks soon. When I first came back to Sydney in early 2020, I had no idea that I was headed for a long stay in Sydney. 18 months later, I'm still here, and it's pretty hard to know when I'll get out of here. And that hasn't been a bad thing. Sydney's been a great place to spend the sort of COVID pandemic for all kinds of reasons. And so I'm grateful that I've been here in many ways. Like many people, I'm missing my old life and can't wait to get back to doing things sort of normal again. Last year, when I realised I was going to be in Sydney for a while, I decided it was a good idea to throw myself into doing Rusty Compass in Sydney, building Rusty Compass here. And that's been lots of fun. I've thrown myself into sort of Sydney in much the same way that I throw myself into other countries when I decide to explore them. Even though I grew up here, I've spent the last year reading history, wandering the streets, walking, visiting all the sort of obvious places like the museums and galleries. But I've also spent a lot of time trying to explore some of the less obvious places. Pulling all that together has been a real joy. I'm completely wrapped up in it right now, and I'm really excited that when we finally get to open up the world again, Rusty Compass will have Australian stuff on it, and also Old Compass Travel will also start doing some cool things in Australia as well. Rusty Compass has always been very interested in history and heritage, and in countries like Vietnam and Cambodia, where economic development is naturally a really high priority, it's kind of inevitable but also tragic that a lot of history and heritage is getting destroyed in the sort of process of rapid development. Turns out there are similarities between the heritage conversations in Saigon and those that go on here in Sydney, especially out in Parramatta where I grew up. I'm actually from Auburn, close by Parramatta, but we spent a lot of time here as kids in the 70s and 80s. I've only become fully aware of Parramatta's importance in Australian history over the last decade or so. Parramatta was central in the early years of the dispossession of our First Nations people, and it was also key in the early settlement of the British colony. So this is a place of extraordinary historical significance, but it doesn't get that much attention. Right now, Parramatta is at the centre of one of the biggest property development binges in Australia. The skyline seems to change every couple of months, and history and heritage struggle to cut through. Last week, at the end of a long heritage battle, the demolition teams got a COVID lockdown exemption, and the destruction of this little precious piece of heritage got underway. Willow Grove is an 1870s villa that adds some character, some green space and some breathing space to a pretty busy strip in downtown Parramatta. It's being demolished to make way for a museum, an $800 million expansion of the Powerhouse Museum. A lot of people have already noted the strange irony of demolishing a heritage building to build a museum. The Powerhouse Parramatta project was conceived as a relocation of the original Powerhouse Museum. The government wanted to redevelop the original site. After a huge public outcry, that plan was canned and the relocation became an extension. It's not really the origin story of an inspired cultural institution. The original powerhouse behind me here in Ultimo, not far from the centre of Sydney, is in a fabulous old industrial space, and it's been a great museum for, well, since the 80s. And its only kind of shortcoming has been that it's suffered a bit of neglect over the last decade or so. The government's actually promised to address that and is planning to pump hundreds of millions of dollars into this museum as well. And that makes the Parramatta Powerhouse project even more curious. You have to ask how many people, how many visitors to Sydney will want to visit a Powerhouse Museum, because they're going to be divided between this complex, which we're promised is going to be renewed with a big investment, and then the new one in Parramatta. Is that really the best use of hundreds of millions of dollars of public money? Parramatta deserves better than that. Parramatta can have unique landmark museums that stand in their own right. This is Parramatta's opportunity to build a unique global landmark. The old female factory precinct from the early 1800s connects with our Indigenous history, with our convict history, and with our women's history. And it's also a superb collection of heritage buildings in a vast space. And it should be as important to us as the Rocks or Port Arthur in Tasmania or any of the other great heritage sites in Australia. Parramatta badly needs a landmark cultural destination, and it needs the kind of investment that has been allocated to the Powerhouse Museum. The problem is that the Powerhouse Museum is not the right project. It's not the right project because Powerhouse is not a project that connects with the unique stories and history of Parramatta. In my next video, I'll talk about the opportunity at the female factory precinct and how something of national significance for all of Australia can be built there. Thanks very much for joining me. A fond farewell to Willow Grove, and we'll talk again very soon. Cheers.